I believe that these days, particularly in the United States, you have to be a politician or a celebrity. The 1960s are raging, and the rock culture is booming with excesses of raw talent and famous people who are bigger than life. The mysterious and self-destructive frontman of The Doors, Jim Morrison, is one of the most controversial figures in rock and roll history. Some have called him a poetic genius, while others have called him an egotistical troublemaker. Decades later, Grace Slick, another legendary figure from the psychedelic era, has made shocking revelations about Morrison that have left fans in shock, but this is only the beginning. Jim Morrison's life was a battleground of disputes, scandals, and personal demons, and today we're revealing the darker side of the so-called Lizard King. Few rivalries were as strong as the one between Grace Slick and Jim Morrison, who both fronted two of the most innovative bands of the day, Jefferson Airplane and The Doors. The 1960s rock music scene was driven by turmoil, invention, and intense personalities. Their paths eventually crossed many times, and each time they did, sparks flew, and not the good-hearted Slick, who was known for her sardonic wit and fearless manner, saw through Morrison's mystique. While many admired him as a poet and prophet, she frequently saw him as a self-absorbed destructive force whose actions went beyond simple rock star rebellion. It wasn't just his excessive drinking or his wild stage antics, it was his attitude and complete disregard for those around him. At one festival, Morrison was heavily intoxicated, making a scene backstage, insulting other musicians and even trying to control the conversation with his slurred philosophical ramblings. Slick never held back when publicly criticizing him for his actions, which resulted in a heated argument that almost descended into violence. However, what really cemented her disdain was Morrison's treatment of women. His reputation as a womanizer wasn't an exaggeration, rather, it was a well-documented pattern of reckless and occasionally abusive behavior. Slick, a woman who had battled for her position in a male-dominated industry, found Morrison's actions repugnant. She said, "I'd like to do a song that or a piece of music that's just a pure expression of, joy." There were rumors circulated among rock circles about his unsettling interactions with the women he encountered, rumors that Slick later confirmed in her revelations, painting a portrait of Morrison that was very different from the romanticized version. Many supporters continue to believe that Morrison was never one to back down from a fight, and his list of adversaries went well beyond. One of the most notorious conflicts was with Janis Joplin, which began as a friendly encounter at a party but swiftly escalated into a heated situation when Morrison, intoxicated and aggressive, started harassing her, making offensive comments, and grabbing at her in a way that made her clearly uncomfortable. Grace Slick's unpredictable and frequently aggressive personality led to bitter feuds with numerous figures in the music industry. Instead of learning from the conflict, Joplin, who is never intimidated, reportedly broke a bottle over his head to get him to get off of Morrison. He then laughed it off and even boasted about it later, calling it a badge of pride. This wasn't an isolated event. Even within his own band, it was a habit that contributed to his developing reputation as a gifted musician and a dangerous provocateur. Morrison was a ticking time bomb, and Ray Manzar, the Doors keyboardist, frequently served as a mediator. The tension between Morrison and the other members, particularly drummer John Densmore, was evident, and his unpredictable behavior in the studio and on stage became unbearable. He would arrive late, if at all, and would be completely drunk, causing recording sessions to go awry, slurring lyrics, and occasionally refusing to record at all. Because of his unpredictable nature, sessions that should have lasted hours turned into days, costing the band money and patience on stage. He would insult the audience, luring them into violent outbursts, and occasionally collapse in the middle of a performance. At one gig, he mocked security personnel until a brawl broke out, forcing the band to leave the stage. His performances started to focus more on spectacle than music. The breaking point for many was the notorious 1969 Miami concert where he allegedly exposed himself on stage. Rather than singing, Morrison ranted about his disenchantment with music and celebrity before going on an offensive tirade that resulted in a police arrest warrant. The Doors' demise was heralded by the scandal's aftermath, which included cancelled performances, legal issues, and internal conflict that drove the group to the verge of dissolution. Morrison had a turbulent relationship with music executives and promoters. He hated the commercialization of music and frequently went out of his way to ruin interviews and publicly make fun of the industry at press conferences. He would stare blankly at reporters and give them cryptic, nonsensical answers, or worse, insult them outright. He saw record labels as the enemy, accusing them of trying to shape him into someone he wasn't. This attitude led to heated arguments with Elektra Records, as Morrison battled label executives who viewed him as an untrustworthy liability who refused to promote albums and would instead go missing while intoxicated. Morrison's refusal to play the music industry's game made him difficult to manage, and by the early 1970s, many in the music industry had written him off as a lost cause. Even rock journalists were not immune to his contempt. At times, he would sit in silence refusing to engage, and at other times, he would explode into drunken rants about death poetry and anarchy. One reporter assigned to interview him in 1970 recalled finding Morrison passed out in a hotel room surrounded by empty bottles and cigarette burns on the carpet. Morrison's difficulties extended beyond his career. His personal life was an addiction spiral. Battles within and self-destruction. His relationship with Pamela Courson, whom many people believed to be his soulmate, was far from steady. Their drug-fueled love was poisonous, intense, and violent. Jealousy and persistent adultery. Friends recalled how Morrison would disappear for days, leaving Pamela in distress, only to return home and whisper apologies before repeating the same destructive cycle. Their fights were renowned for breaking glass and occasionally turning into physical altercations. The two of them could go from being deeply in love to viciously fighting in a matter of minutes. Despite the chaos, Morrison always came back to her, maybe because he saw in her a reflection of his own self-destructive tendencies, or maybe because he was too entangled in their twisted bond to ever truly break free. Morrison was known to throw things, punch walls, and push Pamela to the edge while she was equally volatile and retaliated with her own fiery temper. They fought in front of friends, in hotel lobbies, recording studios, and anywhere else without shame or restraint. Morrison was born into a strict military household and had a deep-seated resentment toward his father, a Navy admiral, whom he cut out of his life entirely. His childhood was marked by strict discipline, cold indifference, and a lack of emotional connection. He detested authority, a rebellion that probably resulted from years of feeling ignored and rejected in his own home. He even went so far as to claim that his parents were dead, removing them from his personal narrative as if denying their existence would somehow release him from their control. His family disassociated themselves from his public persona because they were ashamed of his actions. Reluctant to accept that he is a rock star, it is said that his father, who was unable to appreciate the genius behind his son's chaotic craft, once wrote to him, advising him to choose a more fruitful career than music. Morrison was plagued by this broken relationship, which fueled his disobedience and possibly made his drug problems worse. Morrison's alcoholism was notorious, but his drug use was just as dangerous. He experimented with LSD, heroin, and anything else that would change his mind, frequently with disastrous results. Some claim that he drowned himself in liquor to ignore the ghost of his father's disappointment, and to escape the deep-seated pain of never feeling accepted. Friends and bandmates recounted nights where he would collapse unconscious, waking up with no memory of what had happened. He would wander the streets of Los Angeles in a haze, disappearing into dingy motel or unknown apartments only to re-emerge days later looking worse than before. His body, once lean and commanding, began to swell with years of unchecked drinking. His face, once sharp and captivating, became bloated, his eyes sunken and unfocused. By the early 70s he was barely a shadow of his former self. The rock star who once commanded the stage with hypnotic energy now stumbled through performances, slurring his words, losing himself in incoherent rants, or simply staring blankly at the audience as if trapped inside his own mind. His downward spiral was so evident that even his most devoted fans began to worry the Lizard King was unraveling before their very eyes. But no one knew how to stop it. By 1971 Morrison had had enough. He fled to Paris with Pamela, seeking solace away from the chaos of fame. But peace was elusive. Ultimately, Jim Morrison was a man of contradictions, a visionary and a destroyer, a poet and a tyrant, a legend and a tragedy. His drinking and unpredictable behavior continued until he was discovered dead in his apartment's bathtub on July 3, 1971. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but there was a lot of conjecture because some people thought it was a heroin overdose, while others suggested a cover-up. His influence on music is indisputable, but so is the damage he left behind. As more historical individuals, like Grace Slick, come forward with their unvarnished realities, the myth surrounding Morrison keeps coming to light, exposing the very flawed guy who lies beneath the fiction.